They looked at her hoodie and sneakers and saw a nuisance. They looked at her skin and saw someone who didn't belong in row 1. When the gate agent sneered, "Check your ticket, honey, economy is back there." He didn't just break protocol, he signed the death warrant for his entire career. He thought he was shaming a helpless passenger. He had no idea he was blocking the path of Dr. Vivian Cross, the Department of Transportation's most feared undercover auditor. And what happened next didn't just get him fired, it dismantled the entire airline's hierarchy. This is the story of the upgrade that cost them everything. The fluorescent lights of JFK's Terminal 4 hummed with that specific, headache-inducing frequency that only seasoned travelers seem to notice. It was 6:45 a.m. on a Tuesday, the kind of morning that felt like it had started 3 days ago. Dr. Vivian Cross adjusted the strap of her battered canvas duffel bag. She wasn't wearing the tailored power suits she usually donned for congressional hearings in D.C. Today, she was in audit mode. That meant oversized grey sweatpants, a faded hoodie from a university she didn't attend, and hair pulled back in a messy, no-nonsense bun. She looked like a tired grad student, or perhaps a mother traveling home after a long week. She certainly didn't look like the senior compliance officer for the Federal Aviation Administration's Office of Civil Rights. She approached the gate for North Atlantic Air Flight 294 to London Heathrow. The sign above the desk glowed with the promise of priority boarding, first class and diamond medallion. Standing behind the podium was Gregory Pulsifer. Greg was the type of gate agent who wore his uniform like it was a general's regalia. His badge was polished, his tie was knotted with aggressive precision, and his eyes scanned the crowd with a mix of boredom and disdain. He was currently chatting with a younger agent, barely looking up as the line for Group 1 began to form. Vivian stepped into the first-class lane. She was the third person in line, behind a man in a bespoke navy suit and a woman dripping in Louis Vuitton accessories. Greg scanned the man's boarding pass with a bright, "Welcome aboard, Mr. Henderson. Enjoy the champagne." He scanned the woman's pass. "Lovely bag, Miss Sterling. Right this way." Then, Vivian stepped up. She held out her phone, the QR code for seat 1A glowing on the screen. Greg didn't reach for the scanner. He didn't even look at the phone. He looked at Vivian's hoodie, then down at her canvas bag, and finally at her face. His lip curled slightly. A micro-expression Vivian had catalogued 1,000 times in her line of work. "Ma'am," Greg said, his voice loud enough to carry over the ambient noise of the terminal. "Group 4 hasn't been called yet. Please step aside so the first-class passengers can board." Vivian didn't flinch. She kept her phone extended. "I'm not in Group 4, Gregory. I'm in Group 1. Seat 1A. Greg let out a short, incredulous laugh. He looked past her to the growing line of impatient business travelers. "Ma'am, please. We have a very full flight today, and I don't have time for games. The economy boarding lanes are zones 3 through 5. They are located on the other side of the pillar. Move." "I paid for this seat," Vivian said, her voice calm, devoid of the anger Greg was clearly trying to provoke. "If you scan the pass, you'll see that." "I'm not scanning a fake pass or a glitch, sweetheart," Greg snapped, finally dropping the customer service veneer. He leaned over the podium, dropping his voice to a patronizing whisper. "Look, I know people try to sneak upgrades. It's pathetic. But you're holding up actual paying customers. If you don't step out of this line in 5 seconds, I'm marking you as a disruptive passenger. Do you know what that means? It means you don't fly at all." Behind Vivian, a heavy sigh echoed. It came from a tall, balding man clutching a leather briefcase. "Come on, lady," he grumbled. "Some of us have meetings. Just go to the back." Vivian turned slightly, locking eyes with the man. "I have a meeting, too, in London." She turned back to Greg. "Scan the code, Gregory. That is your job. If it rejects, I walk away. If it beeps green, you let me on. Simple. Greg's face reddened. His authority was being challenged in front of his real customers. He snatched the scanner up, wielding it like a weapon. Fine. When this blares red, I'm calling security. He jammed the scanner toward her phone screen. Beep. A solid affirmative green light flashed on the console. The screen read, Cross, Vivian. 1A. First class. For a second, silence hung over the podium. Greg stared at the screen, blinking. The machine had betrayed him. Broken, Greg muttered. He hit the refresh button. System error. It's not an error, Vivian said, stepping forward. It's a ticket. Now may I? She moved to pass him. Greg sidestepped, physically blocking the jet bridge entrance. His ego was now fully engaged, overriding his training. Hold on, Greg said, his eyes narrowing. This ticket, full fare first class, purchased 3 hours ago. He looked her up and down again, his gaze lingering on her sneakers with open disgust. This was purchased with a stolen credit card, wasn't it? We get flags for this all the time. Fraudulent same-day purchase. Excuse me? Vivian's calm was beginning to fracture, replaced by the icy steel that made CEOs sweat during depositions. Are you accusing me of a felony because of my attire? I'm conducting a security verification, Greg said smugly. He began typing on his keyboard. I'm flagging this ticket for fraud review. You're not getting on this plane until I see the physical credit card and a matching ID that proves you can afford a $6,000 seat. I used a corporate card. It's digital, Vivian lied smoothly, part of her cover. I have my ID. Not good enough, Greg smirked. He looked at the line behind her. Folks, I apologize. We have a security situation. If you could just go around this individual. He gestured for the other passengers to bypass Vivian. They brushed past her, some muttering insults, others averting their eyes. Vivian stood like a stone in a stream, watching them board the plane she was legally entitled to be on. She pulled out her phone, not to show the ticket, but to check the time. 6:52 a.m. She opened a secure app, typed a quick note. Agent G. Pulsifer, JFK Gate B22. Denied boarding despite valid scan. Accusation of fraud based on appearance. Incident logged. You can stand there typing on your little burner phone all you want, Greg said, turning back to her after the rush had died down. You aren't getting in 1A. Best I can do, if the fraud check clears, which I doubt, is stick you in 34B by the lavatory. Take it or leave it. Vivian looked up. A small, dangerous smile played on her lips. It was the smile of a hunter who had just watched the prey walk into the trap. I'll take 34B, she said softly. But Greg, make sure you spell my name right on the manifest. Greg laughed, printing a new boarding pass and tossing it onto the counter. It drifted to the floor. Vivian bent down, picked it up, and walked onto the jet bridge. She wasn't defeated. She was just gathering evidence. Vivian walked down the jet bridge, the new boarding pass for seat 34B, burning a hole in her pocket. She wasn't angry anymore. She was calculating. Every insult, every sneer, every policy violation was fuel. In the world of federal auditing, you didn't need a weapon. You needed a paper trail, and Greg had just handed her a novel. As she stepped onto the aircraft, she was greeted by the lead flight attendant, a woman whose name tag read Tata. Tata had a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was plastered on like heavy foundation. Welcome aboard, Tata chirped. She glanced at Vivian's boarding pass. Economy is to your right, all the way back. Actually, Vivian said, pausing, there was a mix-up at the gate. I paid for 1A. The agent downgraded me because he suspected fraud. But I assure you, if the gate agent moved you, there's nothing I can do. Tata cut her off, her voice dropping an octave, losing its customer service lilt. She looked past Vivian to a man entering behind her. "Good morning, sir. Welcome. Can I take your coat?" Vivian didn't move. "I understand the protocol, Tata. However, I have a first-class ticket on my phone. The seat 1A appears to be empty. If I could just—" "Ma'am," Tata snapped, turning back to her with a look of severe annoyance. "We are trying to board. You are blocking the aisle. Seat 1A is reserved for cleared passengers. If Greg flagged you, you stay in the back. Do not make me call the captain." Vivian nodded slowly. "Understood." She began the long walk of shame. She passed through the first-class cabin. She saw seat 1A, her seat. It was a plush, lie-flat pod with a duvet and a noise-cancelling headset waiting on the console. It was empty. She continued past economy comfort, past the exit rows, deeper into the belly of the plane. The air grew stuffier. The overhead bins were already full. When she finally reached row 34, right next to the rear lavatories, she found seat B. It was the middle seat. To her left was a teenager listening to music so loud she could hear the bass. To her right was a man already asleep, his elbow firmly planted in her space. There was no room for her bag in the bin. "Excuse me," Vivian said to a passing flight attendant, a young man named Jason who looked overwhelmed. "There's no bin space. Can I check this?" "Just put it under your seat," he muttered, rushing past with a stack of napkins. "It won't fit," she whispered to herself. She ended up jamming the expensive bag between her legs, knees pressed against the seat in front of her. The plane finished boarding. Vivian craned her neck. Seat 1A was still empty. They had flown with a vacant first-class seat rather than let her sit in it. That wasn't just bias. That was revenue mismanagement, a violation of carrier contract, and discriminatory practice wrapped in one package. The engines whined to life. As the plane taxied, Vivian retrieved her burner phone, actually a secure government-issued device with encrypted recording capabilities. She started a new audio log. Flight NA294, denied confirmed seat 1A, downgraded to 34B without compensation or valid cause. Lid Fei Tata refused to examine digital ticket. Seat 1A departed empty. Just then, the fasten seatbelt sign dinged off as they reached cruising altitude. Vivian needed to use the restroom, mostly to stretch her legs, which were cramping in the tight space. She stood up and moved toward the rear galley. The curtains to the galley were drawn, and she could hear Tata and another attendant laughing. "Did you see her?" Tata's voice was muffled but audible. "Greg radioed me. Said she tried to bully him with a screenshot. Probably photoshopped. Who wears a hoodie to first class? People have no class anymore," the other voice agreed. Greg said she looked like she came from a shelter. Vivian stood outside the curtain, her hand hovering over the fabric. This was gold. She recorded for 10 more seconds, then cleared her throat loudly and pushed through the curtain. The laughter stopped instantly. Tata spun around, her face hardening. "The restroom is right there," Tata pointed, not bothering to hide her annoyance. "I need water," Vivian said. "My throat is dry." "We'll be doing drink service in 30 minutes, Tata said, turning her back to organize a cart. "I'd like water now, please. I believe first-class passengers, which I am technically, are entitled to pre-flight beverages. I never got mine." Tata spun around, slamming a pair of tongs onto the metal counter. "Listen to me closely. You are seated in 34B. You get what 34B gets. And right now, 34B gets to wait. If you come into my galley again to harass me, I will have restraints put on you. Is that clear?" Vivian stared at her. The threat of physical restraint was the final nail. "Crystal clear, Tata. Thank you for clarifying the service standards." Vivienne turned and went back to her seat, but she didn't sit down immediately. She saw the passenger in 34C, the sleeping man, had woken up. He was glaring at her. "Can you sit down?" he spat. "You people are always up and down, up and down." Vivienne froze. "You people?" "Yeah, economy people," he sneered, though the racial undertone hung heavy in the recycled air. "Some of us pay for peace and quiet." Vivienne sat. She closed her eyes. She visualized the organizational chart of the Department of Transportation. She visualized the North Atlantic Air operating license. She visualized a wrecking ball. An hour into the flight, turbulence hit. It wasn't bad, just a few bumps, but the captain came over the intercom. "Folks, Captain O'Malley here. We've got some chop ahead. I'm turning on the fasten seatbelt sign. Flight attendants, please take your seats." Vivienne's stomach rumbled. She hadn't eaten since 5 a.m. She knew the first-class cabin was currently smelling of warm cookies and filet mignon. Suddenly, a commotion erupted 3 rows ahead. A woman stood up. Beatrice van der Waal, according to the luggage tag Vivienne had spotted earlier. She was a middle-aged woman with a tight bob haircut and a very loud voice. "I can't sit here," Beatrice screamed, pointing at a crying baby next to her. "I have a migraine. I demand to be moved." Tata, who had not taken her seat despite the captain's orders, rushed over. "Ma'am, please, the seatbelt sign is on." "I don't care," Beatrice yelled. "Move me to first class. I know there's an empty seat. I saw it when I walked in." Vivienne's eyes snapped open. Tata looked at Beatrice, then glanced back toward the front of the plane. "Ma'am, usually we don't do operational upgrades mid-flight." "I am a platinum member," Beatrice shrieked. "Get me out of this hellhole." Tata smiled, a genuine sycophantic smile this time. "Okay, Ms. van der Waal, let me see what I can do. Since 1A is empty, come with me quickly." Vivienne watched in disbelief as Tata ushered the shouting woman up the aisle, past the curtain, and into the seat that Vivienne had paid $4,000 for. That was it. The line had been crossed, erased, and spat upon. Vivienne unbuckled her seatbelt. "Ma'am, sit down," the flight attendant named Jason called out from his jump seat. "No," Vivienne said, her voice projecting with the authority of a federal judge. "I don't think I will." She walked up the aisle. The turbulence shook the floor beneath her, but she didn't stumble. She walked with a center of gravity that came from righteous fury. She marched straight through economy, ripped open the curtain to first class, and stood at the front of the cabin. Beatrice was settling into 1A, sipping a glass of champagne that had appeared miraculously fast. Tata was fluffing a pillow for her. "Excuse me," Vivienne announced. The entire first-class cabin turned to look at the woman in the hoodie. Tata dropped the pillow. "You! I told you. You put a disruptive passenger who paid for economy into my seat," Vivienne said, her voice steady but loud enough to be heard by the cockpit door. "You denied me boarding based on my appearance. You threatened me with restraints. And now you are violating FAA regulation 14 CFR 382 regarding non-discrimination and the specific carrier contract regarding seat assignments." "Get out!" Tata screamed, marching toward her. "I am calling the captain." "Good," Vivienne said, reaching into her hoodie pocket. She didn't pull out a weapon. She pulled out a leather wallet, flipped it open, and held up a gold badge that caught the cabin light. "Call him. Tell Captain O'Malley that Special Auditor Dr. Vivian Cross is here, and tell him he needs to land this plane immediately." The silence that followed was louder than the jet engines. Tata froze mid-step, her eyes glued to the badge. The champagne glass in Beatrice's hand paused halfway to her mouth. "Federal Auditor?" Tata whispered, the color draining from her face so fast she looked like a ghost. "That's right," Vivienne said, stepping forward, forcing Tata to step back. "And you, Tata, are in a world of trouble." The atmosphere in the first-class cabin shifted instantly from elite comfort to a suffocating dread. The gold badge in Vivienne's hand seemed to suck all the oxygen out of the room. Tata stared at the badge, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The arrogance that had armored her just seconds ago evaporated, leaving a terrified defiance. You can't be," she stammered, her eyes darting around the cabin for support. "You're wearing sweatpants. Federal agents wear suits." "Undercover auditors wear whatever exposes bias," Vivienne corrected, her voice ice-cold. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. The authority in her tone was absolute. "Now, get the captain. And Miss Vanderwall." She shifted her gaze to the woman sitting in 1A with the champagne. "Get up. You are sitting in a crime scene." Beatrice Vanderwall looked affronted. "Excuse me? I am Platinum. Who do you think? I am a federal officer conducting an active investigation into violations of Title 49 of the United States Code," Vivienne interrupted. "Move, or be charged with interfering with a federal investigation. Your choice." Beatrice scrambled out of the seat so fast she spilled champagne on the expensive upholstery. "Tata!" A booming male voice came from the cockpit. The door swung open, and Captain O'Malley stepped out, a scowl etched on his face. He was a large man, used to absolute control of his vessel. "What is going on out here? I'm trying to fly through CHOP and I hear shouting about badges?" He stopped short when he saw Vivienne standing in the aisle, holding her credentials, with his lead flight attendant cowering against the galley bulkhead. Vivienne stepped toward him, offering the badge for close inspection. "Captain O'Malley, Dr. Vivienne Cross, Department of Transportation, Office of Civil Rights Aviation Enforcement. Your aircraft is now under federal audit." O'Malley looked at the badge, then at Vivienne's face. The color drained from beneath his tan. Pilots knew about the audit ghosts. They were myths whispered about in crew lounges, agents who appeared out of nowhere to ground flights and end careers. He had never believed they were real. "Dr. Cross," O'Malley said, his voice tight. "Can we discuss this in the galley? You're alarming the passengers." Your flight attendant alarmed the passengers when she threatened a federal officer with physical restraints and violated anti-discrimination laws, Vivienne said, holding her ground. "I have recorded evidence of systemic failures, starting at the gate at JFK and continuing into this cabin. This flight is compromised." "Compromised? We're over the Atlantic," O'Malley argued, trying to regain authority. "Then turn around," Vivienne said. "Or divert to Boston. I don't care. But this plane does not go to London. I need to interview your crew immediately, on U.S. soil, with law enforcement present." "Captain," Tata pleaded, finding her voice. "She's lying. She was disruptive in economy. Greg at JFK said she was suspicious." "Greg at JFK is already being investigated for ticket fraud and civil rights violations based on the report I filed 10 minutes ago," Vivienne said, not even looking at Tata. She kept her eyes locked on the pilot. "Captain, you have two choices. Continue to London and face an international incident when authorities meet the plane there, or divert now and show cooperation with a federal inquiry. Your career hangs on this decision." The first-class cabin was dead silent. The wealthy passengers, usually so demanding, were shrunk into their seats, terrified of making eye contact with the woman in the hoodie. O'Malley looked at Tata, who was trembling. He looked back at Vivienne, stone-faced and unwavering. He knew when he was beaten. "Folks," O'Malley sighed heavily, turning to the cabin. "Return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts. We are diverting to Boston Logan International due to an operational issue. Flight attendants, prepare the cabin for immediate descent." He turned back to Vivian. Satisfied? I'll take seat 1A for the landing, Captain, Vivian said calmly. I need to secure the area. As the plane banked sharply to the left, beginning a rapid descent, Vivian finally sat in the seat she had bought. She didn't touch the champagne. She pulled out her secure phone and sent a priority message to the DOT field office in Boston. NA 294, diverting to Boss. Request FBI liaison and airport police at gate. 2 subjects for detainment. Lead FA Tata Jenkins and Captain O'Malley for negligence. Start processing paperwork for North Atlantic Air Operating Certificate review. It's happening. The diversion to Boston was tense. The silence in the cabin was profound. No drinks were served. No one dared to ring a call button. Tata spent the entire descent strapped into a jump seat, staring blankly at the bulkhead, tears silently streaming down her face. When North Atlantic Flight 294 touched down at Logan, it didn't taxi to a normal terminal gate. It was directed to a remote section of the tarmac, usually reserved for cargo planes or security risks. Looking out the window of seat 1A, Vivian saw the flashing lights before the engines even cut off. 3 black SUVs, 2 airport police cruisers, and a mobile command van were waiting. The seatbelt sign dinged off. Nobody moved. Captain O'Malley came out of the cockpit, looking 10 years older than he had an hour ago. He opened the main cabin door. 2 men in dark suits ascended the portable stairs first, followed by 4 uniformed police officers. The lead suit walked straight to row 1. Dr. Cross, the man said, extending a hand. Special Agent Miller, FBI Boston Field Office. We got your alert. The FAA Regional Director is en route. Vivian stood up, finally feeling the fatigue of the morning. Thank you, Agent Miller. It's a mess. So I hear. Miller turned to the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. This aircraft is currently under the jurisdiction of federal authorities. We will debark you shortly. He turned to the uniformed officers. Escort Captain O'Malley and lead flight attendant Jenkins off the aircraft immediately. Separate vehicles. Take them to interview rooms A and B at the field office. Tata let out a sob as a burly officer approached her. Wait, I didn't. He told me. Save it for the interview, ma'am, the officer said, firmly taking her arm. She was led off the plane like a criminal, stumbling down the stairs in her high heels, the bright tarmac lights illuminating her shame. O'Malley followed, head bowed, refusing to look at his crew. Vivian waited until they were gone. Then she turned to Agent Miller. There's a 3rd suspect, Gregory Pulsifer, gate agent at JFK Terminal 4. He initiated this cascade. Already on it, Miller confirmed. NYPD and Port Authority took Mr. Pulsifer into custody about 20 minutes ago. He was still at the gate. Good, Vivian nodded. She picked up her canvas duffel bag. I need this bag entered into evidence, Agent Miller. It contains the clothing that was deemed suspicious enough to warrant a felony accusation by North Atlantic staff. It's material to the discrimination case. As Vivian walked down the stairs onto the Boston tarmac, the cool air hit her face. She pulled out her phone. It was buzzing with calls from Washington. The dominoes were already falling. Meanwhile, back at JFK Terminal 4, Gregory Pulsifer was sitting in a small, windowless room used by airport security. He was sweating profusely. 2 Port Authority officers were watching him. He had been pulled off the gate in the middle of boarding a flight to Miami. What is this about? Greg demanded, though his voice was shaky. I have a union rep. You can't just grab me. I didn't steal anything. The door opened, and a severe-looking woman in a pantsuit walked in. She was the North Atlantic Air Station manager for JFK. She looked furious, but not at the police. Greg, she said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. Do you know who you denied boarding to this morning? Some hood rat with a stolen credit card, Greg said defensively. I was doing my job, protecting revenue." The station manager threw a tablet onto the table in front of him. It showed a news alert that was already breaking on cable networks. North Atlantic flight diverted. Federal auditor uncovers discrimination scandal. Airline stock plummets 8% in pre-market trading. Below the headline was a photo, a professional headshot of Dr. Vivian Cross, looking powerful and brilliant in a congressional hearing room. Greg stared at the photo. The eyes were the same. The woman in the hoodie. "That," the station manager hissed, "is the senior compliance officer for the DOT. You didn't just deny a passenger, Greg. You denied the United States government. You're fired, effective immediately. And the feds are here to talk to you about federal charges." Greg felt the world spin. The floor seemed to drop out from under his feet. The interview room at Logan Airport was grey, cold, and smelled faintly of stale coffee and fear. Tata Jenkins sat at a metal table. Her perfect flight attendant bun had started to fray, strands of hair falling around her tear-stained face. Vivian sat across from her. Vivian was no longer wearing the hoodie. She had changed into the spare blazer she always carried in her duffel bag. She had slicked her hair back. She was Dr. Cross now, and she was terrifying. Agent Miller stood in the corner, silent, a recording device humming on the table between the women. "This is an official interview regarding federal investigation, DOT case 2024 NA 492, Vivian stated for the record. Subject: Tata Jenkins. Ms. Jenkins, you have been advised of your rights. You waived counsel. Is that correct? I just want to explain," Tata sniffed. "I didn't know who you were. If I had known—" "Stop," Vivian said. She didn't slam her hand on the table. Her voice was quieter, more dangerous. "That right there, Tata, that's the problem. You treated me like garbage because you didn't know I had power. How do you treat people who actually have no power? How do you treat the grandmother in 34B who doesn't speak English well? Or the student traveling on a budget?" "I treat everyone with respect," Tata lied weakly. Vivian reached into a manila folder and pulled out a USB drive. She plugged it into a laptop and turned the screen toward Tata. An audio file began to play. It was muffled, but clear enough. "Voice 1, Tata. Did you see her? Greg radioed me. Said she tried to bully him with a screenshot. Probably photoshopped. Who wears a hoodie to first class? Voice 2. People have no class anymore. Greg said she looked like she came from a shelter. Tata went pale. You recorded me? In a public space on a federally regulated aircraft, where you have no expectation of privacy while performing your duties? Yes, Vivian said. Care to explain the shelter comment, Ms. Jenkins? Is poverty a barrier to entry on North Atlantic Air? It was just talk, galley talk. We were stressed. You threatened to put me in physical restraints because I asked for water, Vivian countered. You used the captain's authority to intimidate a passenger you deemed lesser based on her clothing and the color of her skin. That is a violation of 14 CFR Part 382, ACAA non-discrimination regulations. Each instance carries a fine of up to $37,000 for the airline and potential criminal charges for you for deprivation of rights under color of authority. Tata started sobbing uncontrollably. Please, I need this job. I have rent. I didn't mean it. Vivian watched her cry with clinical detachment. She had seen these tears 100 times. They were rarely tears of remorse for the action. They were tears of remorse for getting caught. You don't have this job anymore, Tata. North Atlantic terminated your employment 10 minutes ago via email to your union rep, Vivian said, delivering the blow without emotion. But my concern isn't your employment. It's your training. Vivian leaned in. Who taught you that someone in a hoodie doesn't belong in first class? Was it Greg? Or was it in your manual? Tatar looked up, desperate to deflect the blame. It's the culture. They pressure us to protect the high-value cabin. Greg, the gate agents, they always flag people who don't look the part, so we can keep the cabin upscale. They tell us to find reasons to move them back if we need space for platinum members. Greg told me to make your life miserable until you went back to economy. Vivian sat back, a grim sense of satisfaction settling in. This was what she needed. It wasn't just 2 rogue employees. It was a systemic directive. Agent Miller, Vivian said, turning to the FBI agent. Did you get that? Loud and clear, Miller said. Good. Vivian closed the laptop. Ms. Jenkins, you're done here. We're going to need your full cooperation in the investigation against North Atlantic's corporate management. If you want any leniency on the federal charges, you will tell us everything about this pressure to discriminate. Tatar nodded weakly, broken. Vivian stood up and walked out of the interrogation room into the hallway. The airport terminal windows showed the sun was fully up now. Her phone buzzed again. It was the U.S. Transportation Secretary himself. She answered. Mr. Secretary. Yes, it's bigger than we thought. We need to subpoena the entire training protocol and internal communications for North Atlantic's JFK hub. Yes, sir, I'm ready. The gate agent and flight attendant were just the symptoms. Vivian Cross was now coming for the disease. 3 days after the incident, North Atlantic Air was in freefall. The video of Dr. Cross marching down the aisle, badge in hand, had been leaked by a passenger in row 4. It had 70 million views on TikTok. The hashtag #DroitSeat1A was trending globally. The airline's CEO, Richard Sterling, a man who had spent his career cutting costs and raising baggage fees, sat at the head of a mahogany table in the airline's Manhattan headquarters. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week. Opposite him sat Dr. Vivian Cross. She was no longer in a hoodie. She was wearing a sharp, navy blue power suit that cost more than Greg's yearly salary. Flanking her were 2 attorneys from the Department of Justice. Dr. Cross, Sterling began, his voice dripping with forced contrition. First, let me express our deepest apologies. The actions of Mr. Pulsifer and Miss Jenkins were rogue anomalies. They do not represent our values. Vivian didn't touch the water glass in front of her. She opened a thick binder. Mr. Sterling, rogue anomalies don't happen in a vacuum, she said, her voice echoing in the silent boardroom. I have reviewed your internal server logs, which were seized by the FBI yesterday. I found a memo sent by your VP of Customer Experience titled Protecting the Premium Brand, Profiling Guidelines for Gate Agents. Sterling froze. He knew that memo. He had signed off on it. Vivian read from the document. Agents should exercise discretion when scanning priority passengers. Indicators of potential fraud include non-business attire, lack of designer luggage, and uncharacteristic demographic matches for the route. She looked up, her eyes piercing him. Uncharacteristic demographic matches. That's a fancy way of telling your staff to keep black women in hoodies out of first class, isn't it? That was meant to prevent credit card theft, Sterling stammered. Speaking of credit card theft, Vivian continued, flipping a page. Your agent, Mr. Pulsifer, accused me of using a stolen card. He flagged it as fraud. Do you know whose credit card that was, Mr. Sterling? Sterling swallowed hard. I assume a corporate card? It was a U.S. government procurement card, issued by the Department of the Treasury. Vivian dropped the bombshell. By flagging it as fraudulent without cause, your airline effectively froze a federal asset. The Secret Service is now looking into your payment processing protocols. They suspect North Atlantic has been manually rejecting valid payments from undesirable customers for years to save seats for upgraders. Sterling put his head in his hands. This wasn't just a PR nightmare. It was a RICO case waiting to happen. "We want to settle," Sterling whispered. "Name your price. We will donate $5 million to a charity of your choice. We will fire the VP. Just make the audit stop. Our stock is down 20%. Vivian closed the binder with a sharp snap. "You can't buy your way out of a federal compliance audit, Richard. The Department of Transportation is fining North Atlantic Air $50 million for civil rights violations. But that's just the government's cut." She leaned forward. "I am personally suing you for defamation and breach of contract, and I'm not settling for money. I want a consent decree. For the next 5 years, every single discrimination complaint filed against this airline goes directly to my desk. I will personally oversee your hiring, your firing, and your training. You work for me now." Sterling looked at his lawyers. They nodded grimly. He had no choice. If they went to court, the discovery phase would reveal things that would send him to prison. "Fine," Sterling choked out. "We accept." Vivian stood up. "Good. Oh, and Richard? I have a flight back to DC tonight. I expect seat 1A, and tell the crew not to judge my sneakers." 6 months had passed since Flight 294 diverted to Boston, but the shock waves were still rattling the foundations of the aviation industry. In Washington, D.C., the air was crisp and smelled of cherry blossoms and old money. Dr. Vivian Cross stood at the podium in the Department of Transportation's main auditorium. The room was packed. Journalists, airline CEOs, and civil rights attorneys sat shoulder to shoulder, waiting for her to speak. Vivian adjusted the microphone. She wasn't wearing a hoodie today. She was draped in a cream-colored wool coat over a tailored charcoal suit, her hair styled in effortless, glossy waves. Behind her, a massive screen displayed the seal of the United States Department of Transportation next to a new logo, the Cross Protocol, Fair Skies Initiative. "For decades," Vivian began, her voice projecting with that terrifying calm authority the world had come to know, airlines operated under the assumption that dignity was an optional upgrade. They believed that a passenger's worth could be scanned at the gate like a barcode. If you looked the part, you were treated like royalty. If you didn't, you were treated like cargo. She paused, making eye contact with the new CEO of North Atlantic Air, who was sitting in the front row, looking suitably chastised. "That ends now," Vivian continued. "The consent decree signed today mandates that all U.S. carriers implement the Cross Protocol. This includes blind auditing of gate agents, mandatory bias intervention training, and immediate financial penalties for involuntary downgrades based on discretionary profiling. We are not just changing the rules. We are changing the culture." The room erupted in applause. Flashbulbs popped, capturing the moment of her absolute victory. Vivian didn't smile, not fully. She just nodded. She knew that while laws could change on paper, karma was a much slower, more personal process for the people who had tried to break her. 300 miles away, in a cramped, humid apartment in Queens, Tata Jenkins sat on the edge of a sagging mattress. The applause on the television screen felt like a physical slap. She muted the volume, unable to watch Vivian Cross be celebrated as a hero. Tata looked around her new reality. Her sleek, high-rise studio apartment near the airport was gone, evicted 2 months ago, when her savings dried up. She was now subletting a room in a basement that smelled of mildew and boiled cabbage. She looked at her phone. She had a job interview in an hour. It was her 15th interview in 3 weeks. She pulled on her best blouse. the one she used to wear under her flight attendant uniform, and tried to smooth out the wrinkles. She caught her reflection in the cracked mirror. The heavy makeup she used to wear to hide her fatigue was gone. She couldn't afford the expensive brands anymore. She looked tired. She looked ordinary. An hour later, Tata sat in the small, glass-walled office of a boutique hotel manager in Manhattan. She was applying for a front desk position. It was a step down from being a lead flight attendant for a major airline, but she was desperate. The manager, a sharp-eyed woman named Mrs. Gable, was scrolling through Tata's resume on an iPad. "Your experience is impressive, Tata," Mrs. Gable said, not looking up. 10 years with North Atlantic, lead cabin crew, VIP service certification. Why did you leave? Tata's heart hammered against her ribs. She had rehearsed this. There was a restructuring. I decided to pursue new opportunities on the ground. Mrs. Gable nodded slowly. Then she typed something into her browser. Tata watched the reflection in the glass. She saw the search bar. She knew what was coming. Tata Jenkins, North Atlantic. Mrs. Gable stopped typing. Her finger hovered over the screen. She tapped a video link. A faint, tinny sound of screaming came from the iPad speakers. "Get out! I am calling the captain!" It was the video, the viral clip of Tata screaming at Dr. Cross in the aisle of the plane. Mrs. Gable looked up. Her expression had shifted from professional interest to cold, hard judgment. It was the exact same look Tata used to give economy passengers who tried to use the first-class lavatory. "We pride ourselves on discretion here," Mrs. Gable said quietly, sliding the iPad aside. "Our guests include diplomats and celebrities. We cannot have staff who become the story." "I was under pressure," Tata pleaded, her voice cracking. "That video is out of context. I'm good at my job. Please, I need this." "I'm sorry, Miss Jenkins," Mrs. Gable said, standing up to signal the end of the meeting. "We've gone in a different direction. Thank you for your time." Tata walked out onto the busy Manhattan street, the rejection burning in her chest. Her phone buzzed. It was a notification from her bank. Insufficient funds. She ended up taking a job 2 weeks later. Not at a hotel. Not at an airline. She was working the counter at a fast food taco franchise in the Bronx. That Tuesday evening, a customer, a man in a stained hoodie, slamming his fist on the counter. "I said no onions, can't you hear? Are you stupid?" Tata looked at him. She wanted to snap back. She wanted to call security. She wanted to tell him she used to serve champagne to senators, but she couldn't. "I'm sorry, sir," she whispered, bowing her head. "I'll remake it for you." She had spent her career looking down on people in hoodies. Now she had to serve them, and for the first time, she understood exactly how small she had made people feel. If Tata's fall was a slow slide into irrelevance, Gregory Pulsifer's descent was a violent crash. The FBI investigation triggered by Vivian's fraud flag hadn't just uncovered the discrimination incident. It had cracked open a rotten egg of petty corruption. The audit revealed that Greg had been manipulating the same-day upgrade system for years. He had been marking seats as broken or unavailable, then selling them for cash under the table to desperate passengers, pocketing the difference, and fixing the manifest later. He was charged with wire fraud, embezzlement, and computer tampering. He avoided prison time only by taking a plea deal that stripped him of everything. His pension? Gone to pay restitution. His 401k? Liquidated for legal fees. His union protection? Revoked instantly. He was a felon now. 6 months post-incident, Greg stood in the utility closet of JFK's Terminal 4, the same terminal where he used to rule like a king. He wasn't wearing his crisp, navy blue uniform with the gold epaulets anymore. He was wearing a shapeless, vomit green jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too big. On the back, in stenciled white letters, it read, "Terminal Maintenance." "Pulsifer!" The shout came from his supervisor, a man named Manny who was 20 years younger than him, and used to be a baggage handler Greg had ignored. "Yeah, Manny," Greg mumbled, staring at his boots. "The men's restroom by gate B22. Someone got sick. It's a disaster. Get the bucket and the heavy-duty bleach. Move it." Gate B22. His gate. Greg dragged the heavy yellow mop bucket on its squeaky wheels through the terminal. The noise was grating. Squeak, clack, squeak, clack. He kept his head down, pulling the brim of his cap low. He was terrified of being recognized. Every time he saw a North Atlantic pilot or a gate agent walking by, laughing and drinking coffee, he felt a spike of nausea. He reached gate B22. A flight to Paris was boarding. The line for Group 1 was long. Greg set up the wet floor sign near the pillar, the same pillar he had stood behind when he blocked Vivian Cross. He dipped the mop into the grey, sudsy water and slapped it onto the linoleum. He scrubbed furiously, trying to drown out the announcements. "Welcome to North Atlantic Flight 902 to Paris. We are now inviting our first class and Diamond Medallion members to board." Greg paused, leaning on the mop handle, wiping sweat from his forehead with a rag. He looked at the podium. A new agent was there, a young woman with a kind face, smiling as she scanned phones. She didn't look at people's shoes. She just looked them in the eye. "Excuse me," the voice came from behind him. It was smooth, cultured, and vaguely familiar. Greg froze. He knew that voice. It was the voice that had haunted his nightmares for half a year. He turned around slowly. Standing there, not 5 feet away, was Dr. Vivian Cross. She looked magnificent. She was dressed for travel, but in true Vivian style. A cashmere travel set in soft camel, a silk scarf, and a leather tote that whispered expensive taste. She was holding a bottle of sparkling water. She wasn't looking at him with anger. She was looking at him with a calm, detached curiosity, like a scientist examining a bug under a microscope. "Dr. Cross," Greg rasped. His throat felt like he had swallowed sand. "Hello, Gregory," she said. She glanced at his jumpsuit, then at the mop, then back to his face. "I see the career change has been drastic." Greg gripped the mop handle until his knuckles turned white. The shame was a physical heat, burning his neck. He wanted to run. He wanted to scream at her that she had ruined him. But the fight was gone. The federal charges had beaten it out of him. "I have nothing left," Greg whispered, his voice trembling. "They took my pension. They took my house. I live in a studio in Jersey. I scrub toilets in the place where I used to be the boss. Are you happy?" Vivian stepped closer. The passengers in line were watching, sensing the tension, but nobody intervened. "Happy?" Vivian repeated the word thoughtfully. "No, Gregory. I take no joy in human misery. But I do find satisfaction in balance." She gestured around the terminal. "For 20 years you stood at that podium and made people feel small. You decided who was worthy and who wasn't based on the cut of their clothes or the color of their skin. You made people invisible." She pointed to his green jumpsuit. "Now, you are the invisible one. People walk past you. They step over your wet floor signs. They don't look you in the eye. They assume you don't matter because of what you're wearing." Greg looked around. It was true. Passengers were streaming past them, navigating around the janitor and the well-dressed woman without giving the janitor a second glance. He was part of the scenery. "It hurts, doesn't it?" Vivian asked softly. "To be dismissed before you even speak?" Greg lowered his head. Tears pricked his eyes, hot, angry tears of humiliation. "I just want my life back," he choked out. You can't have the old one back, Vivian said firmly. That life was built on a lie, that you were better than other people. But you have a new life now. You have honest work. You have a chance to be humble. Don't waste it. An announcement chimed over the speakers. Final boarding call for flight 902 to Paris. Passenger cross. Please proceed to the gate. Vivian adjusted her bag on her shoulder. She reached into her tote. Greg flinched, expecting her to pull out a camera or a phone to record him, to mock him one last time for the internet. Instead, she pulled out a small, crisp piece of paper. A voucher. I received a lot of compensation vouchers from North Atlantic as part of the settlement, she said, holding it out. I don't fly North Atlantic anymore unless I have to. This is a voucher for a meal at the Terminal Steakhouse. It's worth $50. She placed it gently on the top of his wet floor sign. Go have a real lunch, Greg. Not from the vending machine. Sit at a table. Use a fork and knife. Remind yourself that you're a human being, even if you aren't a gate agent anymore. Greg stared at the voucher. He looked up at her, his mouth open, unable to process the kindness wrapped in the lesson. Why? He asked. Because I'm not you, Vivian said simply. She turned on her heel and walked toward the gate. The new agent saw her coming and beamed. Dr. Cross, welcome back. It's an honor to have you on board. We have seat 1A ready for you. Thank you, Vivian said, scanning her phone. Beep. Green light. She walked down the jet bridge, her head held high, disappearing into the tube that would take her to Paris. Greg stood alone in the middle of the concourse. The terminal hummed with life around him. He looked at the voucher on the yellow plastic sign. $50. A steak dinner. He picked it up with trembling fingers. He looked at the gate where she had vanished. For the first time in 6 months, the knot of anger in his chest loosened, replaced by a heavy, somber realization. He hadn't just lost his job because of a hoodie. He had lost his job because he had forgotten that the person inside the hoodie was just a person. He put the voucher in his pocket, grabbed the mop, and continued to scrub. The floor was dirty, and he had a long shift ahead of him. But for the first time, he scrubbed with a little less anger and a little more humility. The karma had hit hard, but the lesson had finally landed. And that is how one man's arrogance brought down an entire airline empire. It's a powerful reminder that in today's world, you never truly know who you are dealing with. Gregory and Tata judged Dr. Cross by her hoodie, assuming poverty and weakness, but they failed to see the brilliance and authority underneath. They learned the hard way that when you try to deny someone their dignity, you might just end up losing your own. What would you have done if you were in Vivian's shoes? Would you have taken the settlement money, or would you have demanded change like she did? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story about karma hitting back. See you in the next video.